So we are gonna do a tier list and break down some matchup percentages. I guess let's start with that. Let's go with Golden Go first then. It's not gonna be 7%. And it's definitely for me, it's B or C.
Yeah, I
So
think
we're
I'm
looking at
kind of
it.
less hype on Golden Go than we have been in the past. I think I'm down to kind of leave it as a C tier deck for the weekend. But it is probably what was it in Toronto? You said
7%.
7%.
I think it'll be like 4 or 3.
I was gonna say 5. I think like there's just not that many like
X.
looking at the top end of decks. It's Drago and then it's like a pretty steep fall off after Drago, right? I mean, I think obviously
Drago
Reggie
best.
Drago is the S tier choice. It's going to be the most popular deck. I think it's up it's going to be up for sure. I don't think it's going to quite get to 20, but
15.
I think it's 18.
I'd go a little bit more conservative than 18. 18's a lot.
It is a lot. But why would
Yeah.
you play anything else?
Actually, honestly, I feel like I had kind of been leaning towards this, and I hadn't really realized until I'm like thinking about it a little bit more now. But I've done a tier list previously. I feel like this tier list should almost just be just like Drago's number one, and then it should just be like I guess that's not 100% true. It is a little weird, but if we're talking about like what are the best plays, the tier list should almost kind of just be solved around how good is your Drago matchup because Drago is expected to be so successful and it is so popular. So it should be like A tier should be, but I
Well,
don't know if
I
I want
don't
to
think
put
that's true though because it's like there's so like it's 16% of the room.
I don't
It's
want to put
going to be
Raging Bolt
successful.
in A tier because it feels like okay, you're going to beat Drago, but it's going to be hard to get to the point where you can win the tournament.
I want to put Raging Bolt in A tier.
No, I don't. I don't think it's like that good of a play. I think some will get through potentially.
I think it's that good of a play.
I'm not sold on being A tier. The deck that I would look at to put in A tier for sure would be Lugia. Because there's basically no Miraidon. There's basically no what's the other lightning deck? There was another one floating around. What's the other one I'm
Iron
thinking of?
Thorns. There is
Yeah,
Thorns
Iron.
Dragapult though.
There's some thorns, but it's like not a ton. Um, so I'm a pretty big Lugia fan right now because I think you are favored against Drago, and you can basically handle pretty much any other deck in the format. You're not scared of anything.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm a fan of Lugia as well. It's kind of on a downward swing still, but maybe in a month people have had time to kind of realize, oh, Lugia is maybe a little bit better, so it might have a decent jump going into this tournament. To be honest, I could see it being like 7-8%,
yeah, I'm down with that. Bump it up a little bit.
7 or 8,
Let's go with 7.
seven
It could
percent
even
for the
be. It could even be
Lugia.
higher than that. To be honest, I could see it getting back up towards 10, but because like the not sometimes there is like an S tier deck, but the meta or the format isn't like so centered around it, right? And it's not that Drago is like we think Drago's like the best play for this tournament because of like how the meta is adjusting. It's just like it is just the S tier play, and everything is adjusting around it. So it almost feels like the tier list should actually be A tier should be the decks. But once again, then I think about that like, do I really want to put Raging Bolt in A tier? Because
Yes,
there is so much Charizard, there is so much Gardevoir
it's how
and
good of a
Lugia.
play is a deck for this tournament is really like the way to think about it. Um,
The thing is, like, the meta because the players are so stubborn about not trying to commit to beating Drago more. It means
right.
like it's right. Raging Bolt's not as good of a play as it like theoretically could be. It's like
Well,
hard.
Raging Bolt doesn't just like sure you have a bad Gardevoir matchup, bad Charizard matchup, but you can beat them obviously. Like
Well, no, but yeah, but against the other stuff, you're like fine, right? Like you're fine against Dragapult, Iron
yeah,
Thorns. You're fine
that's
against
why
like
it's a
Showdown.
A tier play.
I wouldn't put an A tier though. Unfavored against Clofferapagos.
Is it?
Yeah, I think you're unfavored. Or
Yeah, but
legal
how
unfavored.
popular is Cloth going to be for this tournament as
Oh,
well?
not super popular, but just talking about the matchup in general. Like Cloth will be, I don't know, 4 or 5%. Probably, it'll probably be more popular than Golden Go. I feel like,
Yeah, I think so too. I would see it being
but I would
yeah.
put it. Yeah, I would put Cloth and Raging Ball both in B tier. I feel like they're both B tier decks. Like I think Cloth's Drago matchup is pretty close, maybe slightly unfavorable. Um, but then you're fine against most things outside of that. Um, and Raging Ball, yeah, you have the good Drago matchup. But then once again, like unfavored against Charizard, unfavored against Lugia, unfavored against Gardevoir.
Are you that like I don't know, dude.
But
I don't
if
think
we
you're
were centering this deck, if we're fully centering this around, that's what I'm trying to like figure out what the criteria is. Because if we're like whatever has the best Drago matchup is like the next highest, and you kind of like tier it from there as to Drago matchup gets worse.
I don't
And
think
Raging Ball would be
there's
A
more
tier.
decks in the format than Reggie Drago. There's more decks in the tournament than Reggie Drago. It's
I know, but
16% of the tournament.
yeah, I know, but that's why I wouldn't put Raging Ball in A tier.
Sure.
But like I kind of want to, but like I feel like we shouldn't. Like I want to because like but like if we're only going by that criteria, but I don't. I feel like it's hard to fully go by that criteria.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily as bad into some of these other things as well. Like I don't think its Lugia matchup is terrible. What are we thinking for Bolt? What was it in Toronto?
6.5.
It's probably not going if
I think it's gonna
anywhere
go down. I think it'll go
if
up if
anywhere
anything.
we going down. So like, but I don't think it's going to be
You think
much.
so?
So 6.
I was gonna say if anything, it's gonna go up,
Well, I
but
just don't. I think it's not had the good showings, and so I don't know how quickly people will like come to the conclusion of like it should be more popular than it is. I think
mhm.
maybe people just look mostly at the results. So even though I think it's really good play, personally, like I don't know that that means that it's going to translate to being more popular.
All right, what about Charizard? Something we think that has a bad Drago matchup. I think it's C tier.
Yeah, I think it's just got to be C tier.
And then and
Like
yeah,
there's
the thing
it's
is,
just
like,
it
you are
just
good against a
feels
lot of things.
incredibly mediocre.
Yeah. But it's mostly because of its Drago matchup. Its other matchups, like, you're fine against most other things. I mean, if Raging Bolt has a Briar, that gets close. Your Lugia matchup is close to, probably unfavorable, but and I don't even know, I think people should be playing this less, but it was 12% of Toronto, so I don't even know. I thought it was less of Toronto as well for some reason, but yeah, I looked it up, it's 12.
I thought it was listed Toronto as well, but yeah, maybe I mean, I think like what was the best finishing one in Toronto? It was way down there, right?
It can't been ooh, it was 21st. It was Jackson Ford. Jackson Ford was on the winning end, I believe, as well,
True,
so,
he was, yep.
but that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, on average, it seems like Charizard's not doing great. Jackson is definitely, a higher caliber player than the average player for sure, right? So, but,
Let's give it a
I don't
10.
know. 10? I guess, yeah, maybe.
What else are people going to play, Azul?
I don't know, like Charizard, I guess. All right, Gardevoir.
I think it's going to be kind of popular, like more popular than it has been. Just looking at percentage wise initially here, like it what was it in Toronto? In Toronto, it wasn't on the chart day 1. Day
Yeah.
2 it was up to 6. It was like 5.7. I mean, I think going from what was probably like a 2 or 3% probably to like a 5% seems reasonable.
Yeah, probably. I think 5% is probably reasonable. And I kind of wanted to put this in B tier personally at first, but I think it maybe should just go into C tier because you just have a bad Drago mat. The thing is, you are so good against you're really good against Raging Bolt. You're good against Cloth.
Yeah.
You're favored against Lugia. Your Charizard matchup generally feels unfavorable. The Mawile adds some new tricks.
I think it's totally fine to put Gardevoir as an A tier play for the tournament.
I don't know with how bad like you don't. I wouldn't. I don't think you can put anything in A tier that doesn't have at least a 45-55 Drago matchup.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
I think it has to be another B tier play.
I like Archelodon a lot. I think I talked about it the other week how like I had put a decent amount of time into Archelodon before Sacramento. I think the deck seems pretty strong, but like it definitely still has some things holding it back. But its main detriments are like decks that we're not perceiving to be very good plays for this tournament. So if that's the case, does it get a little bit more of a boost, right? Like we're perceiving Charizard to not be that good, Gardevoir to not be that good.
Well, we don't think they're that good, but they're still gonna be pretty popular, right? Like, we still
Right.
think Charizard's gonna be 10%. If Lugia does show up at 7, that's an unfavorable matchup.
Golden
Raging Ball's
goes
an
pretty
unfavorable
tough as
matchup.
well at 4.
Yeah, so it's gotta be like a D tier, right? I think Archaludon has to go into the D tier.
D tier for the Dawn?
Yeah, I mean, you have, like I think you are favored against Drago. I don't think the Drago matchup is as bad as I initially had thought it was, but I think it is definitely still unfavored.
The biggest question mark for me with this deck is what is its meta share going to be, right?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think you
like
definitely need a lot more narrow of a meta for Archaludon because you wanna be able to abuse
yeah.
Gaming Tower, so, like, isolate the Guardian matchup and then, um,
I think it's gonna
your
be like a
Dragapult.
4% deck.
Sure, I'm fine with that. Well, the best way to play Dragapult right now still feels like Iron Thorns. I think it probably is
Well,
better with Badoo
well,
in the future,
besides Regidrago.
besides Richard Draco. And I think the deck is still pretty good. Every time I play the deck, it feels good, and your matchup spread is fine against pretty much everything. To be honest, like it doesn't feel terrible into basically anything. I think I would put it in B tier, but I've been a decent fan of this deck for a little while, so I don't know if I'm being biased on this one.
Yeah, I think this deck I think that the break in the time is probably only helped this deck, right? giving people more of a chance to kind of pick it up, and so it's like gonna be. And I say help it. I mean, as far as how played it will be, what its meta share is going to be. I think it'll be a little bit higher than what it was in Toronto potentially. Even though I guess it didn't have the best showing in Toronto,
Yeah, it wasn't like
so I guess that could affect it a
spectacular.
little bit. But people have just had more of a chance with the deck. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking it's going to be like a 5% deck, which it was like I think around 4 or something like that off the graph in Toronto. Um,
Yeah, and it did make its way onto the graph like Gardevoir did at 6% going into day
into
2.
day 2, yeah. So I mean, it could even be a little higher at 6. Um, but as far as where to put it, I'm just going to kind of default to you on this, and you say B tier.
Yeah, I still kinda like it in B because yeah, you don't really have any, like I mean, you have good matchups, bad matchups, but you don't have any, like, feels like terrible, like, auto losses or anything like that. It feels like a pretty well-rounded deck still.
Roaring Moon is still kind of hanging around a little bit. It's definitely not a super popular deck. But it does pop up, and there it always seems like there's someone having a decent run with it through day 1 or day 2 at some point in there, right? Um, the aggressive decks can just kind of blow Reggie Drago out of the water, so it's like got that going for it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it has a hard time against a lot of this other stuff on this list.
Yeah, I'm still not a huge fan of the Turbo Moon. I almost feel like it's a D tier.
I think it is, yeah, and I think it's probably
Turbo
gonna
Moon.
it's just like a 2% deck. We got 3 more decks here. We've got the Miraidon, which I think probably can just yeah, probably can just go next to Moon in D tier.
I would give it
Up to
a
C?
little bit more. I think I like Maridon, like, I think it's okay right now because, I mean, you have good I think your favorite against Drago, Lugia,
Sure, sure.
Gardevoir. Your cloth matchup is unfavorable, but it's not terrible because you can just get the first 2 prize cards with, uh and just kinda snowball that. Um, Obviously, like, the bad matchups are, like, the Charizard. You are unfavored against Raging Bolt. Well, but yeah, I definitely like it more than our Child on a Turbo Moon. I
Okay,
think it
yeah.
is a step above.
That's fair, that's fair. We got 2 left, Snorlax, Stall, and Quad Thorns.
Um, I mean, Stall always seems like it's never worse than B tier, so I'm I'm down to put it in B tier. Yeah, it feels like the deck is never, like, worse than, like, the
Yeah.
tier 3-ish area. Sometimes it's better, but it feels like it's never worse than that. It doesn't
Yeah,
feel like a ridiculously powerful play, though.
especially when we look at what we think the best 2 plays are, right? 2 decks that it has a bad matchup against.
I mean, Drago's manageable. Like, I mean, I guess it depends. Like, no one's really doing like the mist energy cape thing anymore. That's where it felt like you had the best Drago matchup. I have to
Yeah.
imagine that people who are doing like the boxed order thing they don't feel bad going into Drago, I would assume. Um, Obviously your Lugia matchup is bad, and basically no one is teching for Lugia, I feel like, anymore in stall. There
Yeah,
was
well,
still
especially because
some
Lugia has been perceived to be less popular, right?
yeah, of course. There's been like no reason to, I guess, as well. So I guess that
Yeah,
could be something that flips around a little bit, but I don't think the stall players are gonna be all of a sudden playing like four Sinnohs or anything like that.
yeah. I would be kinda down to put this in C tier, but again, like, I mean, you play
I
way
could
more
see
than me,
it.
so, like, I, like, will defer to you a little bit here, but
I don't hate it to be honest. I mean, they are like I said, the Drago matchup I don't think is like terrible. They have the canceling clone, whatever, and stuff like that. Actually it's a tough call. I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely between B and C. I'm not thinking about putting it any higher, but maybe put it in C tier actually. You might be right. The
let's
Drago
get it.
matchup, yeah, you maybe aren't dominating stuff enough outside of the Drago matchup.
Last one is the Iron Thorns, the Quad Thorns. It wasn't too long ago where you were pretty, you were liking this deck, I think, heading into Toronto as kinda like a sleeper play. You thought it seemed decent. What do you think about it right now?
I think it's still about there to be honest. I think it's still pretty decent. Like favored against Drago, not by a ton, but I think you are favored.
It's
Obviously,
not
you
better
favored
than
against
C
Lugia.
tier, right?
I think I put in B. Like you got Drago, Lugia. Your Cloth Raptors matchup, I feel like is close, but I think I do
Well,
give
what's
Cloth was the edge.
what's
But
the reason to ever play Quad Thorns over Pult Thorns?
you're just better at playing four Thorns. So like your Charizard matchup's better. I feel like. Well, I don't know. Dragon Ball's pretty good against Charizard. Maybe that one's a little bit of a wash. Um, Lugia matchup is definitely better. Yeah, that's a good question. Your Gardevoir matchup is worse. I don't know. You're better at being a Thorns deck. You are more consistent as a deck.
Sure.
I think like Dragapult Iron Thorns is like 50-50 against Drago, but I think Quad Thorns is favored. So that would to get a better Drago matchup. Um, Gardevoir has to be better as Dragapult Iron Thorns for sure. I don't know. The deck still feels pretty good. Like you're good against so many things. beat Golden Go, you beat Charizard. Your Murata matchup usually feels pretty good as well. They don't really have like they need abilities to play the game. So yeah, I mean I feel like it's pretty good right now.
I don't think it's any higher than 2% meta share, right?
Yeah, it might would even be one, but we can keep it at two.
Yeah.
We're still only at 73% of the meta. So something here is definitely going to be a lot more popular, I think, than
Well, there's also
like
just still a ton of other decks, right? There's like we
yeah, but
didn't
these
rank
decks
Ledge, we didn't rank Ancient Box. I think Ledge is going to be more popular than like Turbo Roaring Moon, probably.
that'll probably be about that if anything. There's no way it's more than 2% for a ledge.
Terapagos.
That one could be a little bit more popular. That one could
Yeah.
be around 2, maybe. But I think something like Raging Bolt or Lugia or no, not Charizard, but like Raging Bolt or Lugia probably is going to be about 10% or something like that, 10 plus.
Well, do
Those are
we
the only
feel
decks
good
that I can
about the
see.
placement of everything right here?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident. This feels pretty similar to some of our past Regidrago 1, Lugia 2. Like
Yeah.
I feel like we've done that a couple times. But it does feel like we're back around to that where there's like the Lugia hate has really died down and it's like given an opening for Lugia to be a top deck again.
You sure you don't want to put Raging Bolt in A tier?
I'm pretty confident. I wouldn't be surprised if it did well and even won the tournament. Like we saw Vincent almost do it at Toronto, right? Lone Raging Bolt and cut around surrounded by a bunch of Regidrago. Did lose to one in top 4, but was on the way to like go through there's like 3 Dragos in a row in top 8 or something like